LeBron James has earned 4 MVPs and championships over the last 20 years. En route to those accolades, he had full control of the league as he had 8 straight NBA Finals appearances. And while LeBron was celebrating this success, several other great teams unfortunately never had an opportunity to compete for a ring. But today, that changes. Because in this reality, LeBron decides to play football instead, and the history of the NBA will be rewritten forever. Starting off in 2003, the Miami Heat would remain about the same after still drafting Wade 5th in this reality. This was due to the fact that Chris Bosh would now go 3rd overall to the Denver Nuggets, and since the Raptors already had a young star guard, they passed on Wade to get the highly regarded big man Chris Kaman with the 4th pick. Finally, with Darko still being taken 2nd overall, the last change was the top pick.
With the first pick in the 2003 NBA draft, the Cleveland Cavaliers select Carmelo Anthony from Syracuse University.
In this timeline, Carmelo was highly regarded as the top prospect now that he wasn't living in the shadow of LeBron. Immediately, his college game was translating straight into the NBA, with his scoring abilities still being his claim to fame. And while he was definitely an impressive young star with a promising future, the media may have been getting slightly ahead of themselves with the headlines. So now the pressure was at an all-time high for Anthony to live up to near impossible expectations. And unfortunately for him, D-Wade was on his own personal path to greatness and was motivated to earn the Rookie of the Year for himself. The race for the Rookie of the Year award was a major headline around the league all season, and with Wade outclassing Melo in each of their 4 matchups, it was looking to be in favor of the Heat Rook. But in the end, it would be Carmelo who was taking the Rookie of the Year honors. This was the first big change in the league with no LeBron, but it would be the last for a few years, because this season there was no change in the playoffs, as the Pistons still defeated the Lakers in the finals, and the next 2 finals will also be the same, with Tim Duncan and the Spurs winning in 05, and then in 2006, the Heat still acquired Shaq, and he and Wade would go all the way for a ring. And now our first big change will take place here in the 2007 playoffs. In our reality, LeBron led the Cavaliers to the finals to face the Spurs, but now we'll have to see how the season turns out without LeBron carrying his team. With the young Carmelo Anthony now having full reins of the Cleveland roster, he was putting up some outstanding numbers to try and push his team into the playoffs and compete for a title. It was by far the best season that Melo has had to date after taking the majority of his team's shots, but with him having the full green light from his coach and his unwillingness to share the ball with his teammates, his team's success would take a major hit and they would miss the playoffs entirely. Now with Cleveland out of the picture, the postseason was up in the air. Would the finals feature the Heat, who were attempting to repeat, or could it be the 2nd seeded Pistons eager for revenge against San Antonio? While they would both be fierce competitors in the East, it was actually going to be the New Jersey Nets looking for a chance at greatness. In the first round, the combo of Jason Kidd and Vince Carter will overwhelm the young Orlando Magic team. Again, the second round against the 76ers would be successful for the Nets to earn a trip to the conference finals. And with one final hurdle between them and another trip to the finals, Vince Carter would lead the way for his team to come out on top of the East. After the huge win, New Jersey would celebrate while the media was already anticipating the coming finals matchup, and I was just as excited as them. Our first major change turns out to be the Spurs versus the Nets without the Cavaliers and LeBron in the way of New Jersey, beating them in round 2. In the reality, we know New Jersey ends up making it to the finals, and Vince Carter in his prime has a chance to maybe defeat Tim Duncan and actually go home winning an NBA championship. However, outlasting Tim Duncan and his Spurs would be far easier said than done. The first game in the series will kick off in New Jersey, and even in front of the enemy fans, Tim Duncan was still making the first strike to give his team an early 1-0 lead. Now the big question was how New Jersey would respond to giving up game 1 on their home court. Backed by a blast from the past, Jason Kidd turned back the clock and put on an outstanding performance to get the series tied back up after 2. And with the Nets now entering enemy territory, Vince Carter will be the next player to step up in the spotlight and lead the way to a 2-1 lead against the heavily favored Spurs. And after that huge win for the Nets, analysts couldn't help but question the Spurs.
I mean, what's there to talk about here? I mean, they might get the Spurs might get swept. I just want to give them one game out of respect for the great Greg Popovich, but I'm at a struggle. I'm at a loss to find out how they're going to win a game.
Unfortunately, though, that may be the last praise the Nets were getting this season. San Antonio was fighting back on the home floor to tie the series once again, and then they take a convincing lead back on the road against the Nets after a pivotal Game 5. And with the Nets facing elimination, a scrappy Game 6 would be coming down to the last shot. We're in the final moments of this Game 6 here. The Spurs are currently up by 2. New Jersey, if they want to be able to beat the Spurs, force a Game 7, they either have to go for a 2 to tie or a 3 to take the lead here. Jefferson has the ball, 12 seconds remaining. Vince Carter, this is a huge moment for Vince Carter, who was never able to win a championship. Our reality, Vince going all the way, a wide open lane for Vince Carter is a mistake by the San Antonio defense. Tied ball game. I was genuinely stunned there was that much space for Carter to drive, but the Spurs have time. 5 seconds left. Tony Parker here at the top. Jason Kidd on him. Tim Duncan down on the post. A wide open lane at the buzzer. Tim Duncan and the Spurs. What is this defense in this game? The Spurs are still winning a championship in this reality, and the next few years are going to be interesting as well. Even with no LeBron, the Boston Celtics would still go all in for a ring in 2008. They were determined to pair some talent alongside Pierce, and after adding KG and Ray Allen, the rest of the season will play out as we know it. They go to the finals to match up with Kobe Bryant, and ended up going on to do what they set out for, which was winning their first NBA championship since Larry Bird. Moving into 2009, the playoffs would also turn out about the same as it did in our timeline. Kobe and the Lakers were defeating Orlando to hoist up another championship trophy, but that isn't where this year's story ends. In our reality, LeBron won the MVP award this year, but who would win it now? It was going to be more of the Lakers, with Kobe beating Bryant, whose stats were off the chart this season. He was winning his second MVP in a row to go along with the championship this season. One of the NBA's biggest letdowns was the fact that the great Kobe only earned one MVP, and that with no LeBron to share the spotlight with, he'd be able to extend his greatness. But that might be the last extra MVP Kobe gets, as a new kid is in town. By 2010, Durant was only in his third year. He was already averaging more than 30 points per night as he was leading the young Oklahoma City Thunder. This MVP would give him the title of the youngest to ever earn the award, but even with his great success, he'd still fall short in the playoffs, which is where Kobe really would shine because he was in the finals again in an all-out battle with Boston. It was a grueling series that would go all the way, but in the end, Kobe and the Lakers would close this finals out in Game 7. These last few seasons have gone relatively the same with or without LeBron, but next season is where things are really going to spice up because that's where LeBron starts his 8 straight finals appearances. So the NBA is going to get very different every season from this point forward. But not everything was different, with the big highlight of the offseason still being the moves that the Miami Heat would make. Chris Bosh left Denver to team up with Dwayne Wade in an attempt for them both to win some rings and overcome the stacked Boston Celtics. Additionally, Carmelo was still dead set on playing in New York and would force his way out of Cleveland by midseason with a trade. However, the real team to watch out for was in Chicago, who would be home to this year's MVP. The Bulls weren't only the top team in the East this season, but they were the hottest team in the entire NBA. And now that their kryptonite of the 2010s wasn't around, they were favorites to win the whole thing this year. By the time the playoffs rolled around, Chicago was looking like a well-oiled machine. They had a great mix of star talent, youth, veterans, and a deep bench. All of this would be too much for the Sixers to compete with in the first round before the Bulls would move on to face Dwight Howard and the Magic, hopeful to get back into the finals. This would be more of a challenge in the first round, but in the end, it was always within reach, with the Bulls taking it home before preparing for an even bigger challenge. On the other side of the East bracket, the second-seeded Celtics were making a strong push for a back-to-back trip to the finals. They'd beat both the Knicks and the Heat in the first 2 rounds to eliminate some of our featured stars, starting a spot at challenging Chicago. And while the Bulls would come out the first 2 games in Chicago with impressive wins, the hype wouldn't last for long. With the next 3 out of the 4 games being in Boston, the savvy veterans of the Celtics would completely pick away at the Bulls game by game, and it seemed this would be the end of the line for the inexperienced Chicago roster, with Boston taking the series after 6. And now we would be about to witness possibly the greatest power forward matchup in finals history. This series would be a duel between Dirk and Garnett, and it was highly anticipated. The spotlight was on the back and forth contest between these two. They were attacking each other relentlessly in the low post, and even with Garnett's superior defense, this matchup was as tightly contested as possible. But while all the hype was built around these 2 stars, the real narrative would be elsewhere. We'd have one individual stepping his game up far more than anyone else, and that would be none other than the Truth, who was having no trouble versus JJ Barea, unlike some other star small forwards we know about. Dirk was putting up a solid effort, but this finals wasn't even close. After 5 games, the Celtics were defeating the Mavericks, as they would completely change NBA history forever. Honestly, one of the most interesting changes is the fact that Shaq now got his 5th championship before retiring, and he is now tied with Kobe Bryant. Now the Celtics would be adding one more banner to their rafters, and with Rose tearing his ACL in 2012, there didn't seem to be anyone who could get in the way of Boston from going straight back to the finals. But before we enter the postseason, we have to talk about Kevin Durant. For the second time now, KD was taking the place as MVP during LeBron's MVP absence. It was another very impressive year for one of the youngest superstars in the NBA, and if you remember a few years back, he earned the MVP but would lose in the playoffs as Kobe went on to the finals. This time would be different though, and now Durant was waiting in those finals for whoever comes out of the East. And as I mentioned earlier, it didn't seem like any team was going to hold Boston's hopes of their 4th finals appearance in 5 years. They were blazing past every team in the East, to include an upcoming Pacers team who without any doubt we'll be seeing more of very soon. But for now, Boston was back in the finals, and it was looking like a dynasty was in the making. That is, until the aging Celtics met the young and hungry Thunder team. Because OKC wasn't winning just game 1. They were continuing momentum in game 2 and certainly wouldn't stop come game 3. And before we know it, they'd be completing the sweep after 4. Durant has now officially won a ring as the best player on his team, and already in just 2012, we are seeing some major differences in narratives of NBA superstars here in our alternate reality. And those wouldn't be the last stars gaining a new light in this story. Carmelo in the offseason of 2013 was, for lack of better words, perfecting his fucking craft. He was working on his game in hopes that it would pay off in the coming season, which pay off it absolutely would, because while LeBron would earn the MVP here in 2013 as we know it, this time around it would be Carmelo Anthony who was taking that title home after years of being one of the NBA's top scorers. The fans in New York were ecstatic to have their team recognized, but there was a problem. Sure, the Knicks would be steamrolling through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs to include defeating Boston, but could they go all the way to the finals? The answer was going to be a loud no, as the Pacers were awaiting them in the conference finals after the development of Paul George had come to be, and they were putting the league on notice as the top team in the East. This would bestow them the honors of taking on San Antonio in the finals, and they were tooled to find success. They had Roy Hibbert anchoring the paint down low, who would surely be a threat to an old Tim Duncan. Paul George was an athletic defender capable of slowing down guys like Manu and Kawhi. And lastly, they had a gritty David West banging down low to assist PG in scoring. And with all of that, things were looking very promising for Indiana. But you'd be gravely mistaken to think the Spurs were going out like that, especially led by Popovich.
We just have to play better basketball.
And after the immense motivation for Coach Pop, the Spurs would go out on the court to continue the dynasty of the last 15 years and would outclass the much younger Pacers in nearly every way. Rightfully so, the Pacers would be upset, but we'd be seeing more of them very soon. Because again, in 2014, Indiana was on top of the East with nobody able to stop them in sight. Lance Stevenson had a massive jump in his play this year and was nearly given the most improved player honors. Paul George was still looked like one of the NBA's best talents, and as they ran through the Eastern playoffs, they defeat the Knicks in the conference finals yet again for another matchup with the Spurs. In this meeting though, Father Time had really caught up to Duncan, and now it would boil down to a battle between George and Kawhi. These two players were each guarding each other and scoring trip after trip. While in the future these two will unite as teammates, for now they were intense rivals to one another. Their play would go back and forth throughout the whole series, and it would set things up for an incredible finale late in Game 7. We have before us a Game 7 between the Indiana Pacers, San Antonio Spurs. Kawhi Leonard has the ball. Danny Granger is sticking him. Kawhi trying to drive in. They're down by 3. They have plenty of time here. Kawhi to fake in the post over George Hill. It's good. He gets his game within 1. That was a tough shot from Kawhi. Very impressive. I don't see Paul George on the court. No PG. Can they get it done without their star? Lance Stevenson driving it in. That is not a good shot over Manu. Manu has the ball. 30 seconds remaining. He's pushing the pace. He's going all the way. Boris D out wide open in the paint. They don't hit him. Manu, the pull-up J. It's off. What are these shot attempts these guys are taking? They foul lands. Stevenson makes a 3-point lead for the Pacers. They're going to try to hold on to this one late in this Game 7. If they win this, NBA history is completely changed. Paul George will be a champion. Roy Hibbert's going to have a ring before he goes on to flipping burgers at McDonald's post-NBA career. A lot can change here. If they could just hold this 3-point lead, they need one stop here. Paul George just checked back in the game. He's sticking Kawhi. We're in for a show here. Kawhi versus PG. 18 seconds. Future teammates, but for now rivals. The Tim Duncan screen. That's a horror screen. Kawhi, his pull-up jumper. That's his shot. That's his shot. And he gets it in. 1-point lead. They have to foul again. George Hill at the line. Hill hit the first free throw. He needs to hit this one to make it a 3-point lead. He gets them both. San Antonio doesn't look like they have any timeouts left. They have to go quick. 10 seconds. Down by 3. They need a miracle to tie this game. Barter, Matt Barter. No way. Matt Barter's taking the last shot. I think the Pacers are going to win. The 2K AI never ceases to amaze me. You have Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard, and Bond is taking the last shot. The Pacers are champions, though. They win by 5 in Game 7 on their home court, and they're going to be celebrating this very well-deserved and earned championship here. But in that offseason, tragedy would strike as Paul George goes down with an injury. Now with the Pacers team deflated, the East would be wide open. The new top teams would be the Atlanta Hawks and the Bulls, who are getting a second win with Rose and now All-Star Jimmy Butler. These two teams would meet in the Eastern Conference Finals, and it would be a competitive series, but in the end, the Bulls are coming out on top, and their success would be celebrated as a fairy tale story of Derrick Rose's rise from injury to a trip to the finals with his hometown team. The only issue was that out West, a powerful dynasty was forming. Steph Curry was leading this Warriors team to levels of offense that the NBA has never seen the likes of. He was in the midst of sparking the 3-point revelation that would take over the league and positioned right in the eye of the storm with the Chicago Bulls in the finals. Steph Curry and Co were on a completely different planet than the rest of the NBA. By no fault of their own, the Bulls stood no chance. The Warriors were just far too good, and not only would they be winning this series, but it'd be hard to imagine they were losing anytime soon. As expected, the next season they were back in the finals, and again they'd be winning as their three-point shooting proved to be too much for the Toronto star DeRozan to keep up with. Steph was earning his second finals MVP in a row, and they were getting even better the next season with the addition of Kevin Durant. The next 2 seasons in a row, Durant and Curry were facing the Isaiah Thomas Celtics, and both times they'd be cleaning shots quickly, and despite Durant joining the Warriors and being marked as a villain, the headlines were more positive in this reality after Durant already won with OKC in 2012. But as we already know, this Warriors story would end in 2019 due to injuries, allowing Kawhi and the Raptors to outlast Golden State and earn their first franchise championship. And going into 2020 in our reality, it would be the Lakers versus the Heat in the bubble, but this time around the Nuggets ended up making it to the finals. It would act as a foreshadowing of what's to come in 2023 as the Nuggets would beat the Heat, who weren't ready just yet to win a ring, and from this point forward the rest of NBA history plays out the same with or without LeBron. Looking back at it all, there were a few players who had major changes. Harden, Westbrook, and Paul George all earned rings. Dirk Nowitzki in this reality ended up not earning a ring at all. Durant earned an extra ring and 2 more MVPs. And speaking of MVPs, Steph was able to earn 2 extra finals MVPs in this timeline, and one person who took a big hit was Wade, who would end up with 2 less championships in this reality. Now we watch the NBA without LeBron, but what about an NBA where LeBron plays forever? Find out by clicking this video next.